You are experiencing the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast.
It is July 2nd, 2025, and welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty, where we are bringing you the people and the organizations fighting for liberty around the country and in your region. Today, we have a special guest back with us, ter Maat. He was the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party this last time around. So we'll get to find out a little bit about how all that went. And also, too, Mike has made a recent jump to the Republican Party. So we're going to find out a little bit about his reasons for that and what he hopes will come from that. And we're also going to talk a little bit about maybe Republicans that now might be in a similar position as Mike, guys like Thomas Massie and stuff, and some of the hurdles they're jumping through right now. And if we have time, we'll also talk about that recent Supreme Court decision just a little bit and whether we want an imperial judiciary or presidency. But before we get into any of that, let me introduce you to our panel. In our lower left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He is a retired engineer in the state of California. In our lower right-hand corner, we have our guest, ter Maat, and my name is Jason McPhee, and I'll be your host. It's possible, too, our Screaming Eagle of Freedom may land sometime during the show, so keep an eye out for him. But what we always try to do initially at the beginning of the show is have a Liberty quote that we think will capture the spirit of some of what we're going to be talking about in the show. And so this time it is going to be Thomas Jefferson. And let's see, Leon, how I'm going to pull that up. Let's see, add it to, there we go. The quote he had here was from his first inaugural address. And a lot of people pick his quote about how he interacts with other countries. But I thought this one is super relevant to some of the other stuff that's going on nowadays, too. And so essentially what he said in there is what I deem the essential principles of our government, economy and the public expense, that labor may be lightly burdened, and the honest payment of our debts and sacred preservation of the public faith. And so both of these really have to do a lot with the idea that, hey, look, government is supposed to be looking out for how it spends its money so it doesn't wind up overtaxing the people to cover all these things. And then the other issue is, too, that, we got to pay our debts, and therefore we probably shouldn't get in a lot of debt. And he had a lot of other quotes, too, where he thought debt was just this horrifying thing that he didn't want the country to get into. But I think this is really appropriate to what's going on right now. And what do you guys think about this quote?
Mike, you can go.
Well, I appreciate that. He probably didn't have any idea how prescient this topic is. I don't think he would have any idea that the United States government, that the federal government alone, would eventually borrow and have on its books over 100% equivalent of the nation's annual GDP. I don't think that he could ever even imagine such a thing. It would seem completely insane. I think it would be completely insane. What he and the founding fathers are worried about was that the federal government would borrow an amount of money that might get up to 5% of annual GDP for the nation. And that would cause, remember, there was, of course, no income tax at the time, that would cause higher taxes, and at the same time, too much centralization, too much power at the federal government. But this idea that the government would be turning into what it has, I don't think that they could even relate. I don't think that they would consider it a logical debate to be had, what to do about this situation. They would
and Mike,
wonder what the hell have you people been doing for the past 200 years.
Well, Mike, I wanted to throw this chart up too, since you kind of invoked the size of that debt. And just so people can visualize it, because as you're saying, Thomas Jefferson couldn't have visualized it. I don't think most of your average citizens really can visualize this. And this is our debt to GDP chart that the CBO puts out every year. And this was the most recent one. And you can see this only goes back to the beginning of the last century. And it's just a relative sliver of what it is today. And here's World War II, where we're over 100%, like you referenced, Mike. And then somehow somehow we got back down, and we kind of held it relatively steady. And now the CBO projects we're headed out into the stratosphere. So anyways, go ahead, Mike. I just wanted people
maybe we're at the stratosphere and we're headed into outer space. We're certainly headed into relatively uncharted waters. There have been other governments that have gone beyond this level. Mm-hmm. What comes to mind most immediately is the Japanese government. There have been governments that have failed. The Greek government is the one that comes to mind most recently, most immediately. Yes. I think for a lot of economists, I would put myself in this category, we actually thought that the world would learn a lesson from Greece, right? That it was a terrible thing for the Greek people. It was expensive for the entirety of the European Union, especially the German banks and the German people, but that there would be a silver lining. At least the world would learn its lesson, right? You would watch a democratic European nation, not a tiny nation. I mean, obviously much smaller than the United States, but not a tiny, not an inconsequential small nation. And the world would see that and realize you can't just continue with entitlement programs, spending all the money that you want, and not engage in entitlement reform before it's too late. That you can't do that. And you would think that everyone had learned that lesson, and that lesson was not learned at all. As a matter of fact, there are folks in Europe, I think, who have learned effectively the opposite lesson, which is, Germany will bail you. Everything is okay. The youngsters don't even know what I'm talking about. And old folks are out of power by now, and everyone just seems to have moved on. In the United States, politicians act like this isn't a real thing. This is smoke and mirrors, or this is a, bedtime story that people tell like a boogeyman under the bed. This is just something scary and it's not real. And I think this is honestly, this is an existential threat to our society. If the federal government collapses, and if we don't do anything about our spending, it will collapse. That's not an interesting statement in the sense that it's just arithmetic. If that happens, it'll obviously bring down the bond market, but it'll bring down other financial markets as well. Initially for other assets, it'll move to currencies, it'll take down the international market for the US dollar, and it will cast the entire world economy into a deep depression. And a depression from which it would be very hard to recover, because you wouldn't have effectively, or at least not efficiently, operating financial markets. And without an ability to correct course after the fact, getting out of a depression is a very difficult thing to do. So you're talking about something that would be a long-term problem and a deep depression. It's it's on the order of magnitude of something that would substantially affect the development of our species. This is it's a big deal. It isn't. I think it would make look small the Great Depression of the early 20th century. So this is something to be avoided. I think the people of this planet deserve better than to have their economic lives upended by people making stupid decisions in Washington, D.C. I think this is a real shame.
Yeah. But the big problem is that we elect those stupid people who make those stupid decisions. That is the big problem. We end up that we deserve the government. We get the government that we deserve. And
you're right.
And part of this problem too, that in that graph Jason is showing, I don't think unfunded mandates are included in that graph, if I'm not mistaken, Jason.
You're absolutely right. They are not included, and that just makes the problem worse. Of course,
exactly.
For the benefit of your viewers, what you're talking about is that this is just the debt that's on the books from issuing securities to raise money to spend any way they want.
Right.
But there is an obligatory overhang that we typically don't call debt, but an overhang of financial obligation is virtually definitionally debt, right? And it's created by, the idea that you are going to have to pay a tremendous amount of money to make good on the legal obligations you have to pensioners and people who are entitled to a variety of social welfare programs. And that exceeds revenue that is associated with those programs.
Right.
And that means that you're on the hook either for higher taxes or to adjust your entitlement programs or issue more debt. And so, to your point, correctly, that figure should be included in this as well.
Absolutely.
Well, and
I guess at the end of the day, we can say that if nothing is done, this debt that we are seeing here with the unfunded mandates that are not included here, this could destroy us if we don't do something about it and do something about it soon. So we have a lot of work to do, I imagine.
Yeah. And the debt has gotten to the point where I think it is literally on the Treasury's side, which that's this is the hockey stick of our debt. So if you're thinking about existential hockey sticks out there, this is one of them that most people aren't thinking about. But as far as the percentages, this one chart just doesn't want to behave right now. But this is essentially showing that the just servicing the debt is the third highest item right now of what we're spending money on, as far as categories that the Treasury lists. So, but I did want to say that for our audience, if Mike sounds like an economist, that's because he is, but he also wears a whole bunch of other hats too. So Mike was and by the way, this isn't the first time Mike's been on the show. He has been on the show a couple other times in the past. You can go look those up and find out a little bit more about his background. But just to refresh people, Mike has an engineering degree, and then he went and got a PhD in economics. He's run a private business, and he has also been a police officer as well, and then a trainer for police officers, and he has taught economics in colleges. I mean, Mike is a Renaissance man.
Wow. Okay.
Well, it takes some time. That's all it really takes.
Yeah. Well, you've worn a lot of hats, and there are a lot of hats, the hats that should be relevant to people who are leading this country. And it's a real shame that, when you were running for vice president, that you didn't wind up, and if initially you were running for the presidential spot in the LP, but, after the convention, you were in the VP spot. But it's a real shame that you
got more
didn't
votes than I did.
Yeah. So, it's such a shame because, a lot of the truth is, in some of you sharp guys who are in the LP, well, now you've migrated to the Republican Party. So I guess we'll find out a little bit about that. But just to show people where you are, to give a quick overview on some of the issues, I want to show your Gold New Deal just so that people can get a quick snapshot of what you're all about. So let me play that.
This election is not going to be about small things. It's not going to be about some court decision, a particular law, or what to do about some government agency. This election is not going to be about a political candidate. It's not going to be about Donald Trump. It's not going to be about Joe Biden. Nor is this election going to be about me. This election is going to be about you. This election is going to be about your own vision for your own future, and whether that future is going to be driven by your own values or driven by someone else's values. There are people today in control of our government who impose a set of values that are different from yours, different from mine, different from those of most Americans. The values of this political class reflect an interest in power and control. These politicians maintain control by manipulating fear. Political parties have pit American against American, undermining our most cherished relationships, quite literally destroying families. The ever-increasing overreach of government has stripped us of our personhood, our individuality, and far too often, our very purpose. Our once thriving people, our culture, our nation, has been forced into an abusive relationship with a government that has gone absolutely mad with power. I'm Mike ter Maat. I'm running for president to end the abuse, to build a new relationship between us and our government, to replace the old abusive relationship with what I call a Gold New Deal. In any abusive relationship, it can be difficult to see the signs. Signs like gaslighting, violence, wasted money, infidelity. Hope is not lost if we forge a relationship with our government that is, once again, based on our own values. To live and let live, to allow our fellow Americans to pursue happiness according to their own standards. It's time to stop fighting with each other and start fighting a political class that takes our money and disrespects our values. It's time for a Gold New Deal.
As president, I will end U.S. involvement in foreign wars and stop sending our money and our young people overseas to fight in wars that profit the elite.
A Gold New Deal means that I will regain our financial freedom by axing government regulation and spending, by dismantling a Federal Reserve system that undermines our standard of living. A Gold New Deal means that I will reverse the weaponization of our justice system, stop abusive law enforcement practices by demanding accountability, and end a hopelessly counterproductive war on drugs. A Gold New Deal means that I will put an end to the Orwellian surveillance state that offends our rights, break up the FBI that insults our values, and end the CIA that has caused worldwide embarrassment to us as Americans.
I'm Mike ter Maat, and all I'm asking is for you to stop putting up with the abuse. To learn more, visit goldnewdeal.org.
So, Mike, I love the way you characterize this relationship, and most people don't really see it that way, I guess, but as abuse and control. And I think that's the way people need to really reframe their ideas here, because this is this is going on over and over. We keep finding ourselves running into these problems, and I think it's because a lot of people see the government in the wrong light, like as their protector or something else, and it's really leading us into a lot of trouble. Anyways, did you have any thoughts you wanted to add on to that, or?
Well, I think you've put it in the correct light. Hey, Tim, how are you doing?
Oh, good, Mike. Thank you.
Good to see you. For me, I think it's a long-term problem, and it's a cultural problem. I think that we have done some things in our cultural lives, in our society, that have caused us to go through a great deal of change. As a libertarian, as someone who's interested in public policy, it's important I remain agnostic on it. I think we all have strong opinions about the changes that have taken place in our culture in the last 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And there are strong arguments to suggest that some things have improved and some things haven't. But abstracting away from all of that, one thing that I would argue very strongly is that the role of government in our lives has expanded, not merely in terms of it becoming larger, more powerful, taking and spending more of our money. All of those things are true. But also in terms of presenting new threats to us, threats in terms of our international militaristic interventionism, threats to our economy in terms of shutting us down, coming through COVID, for example. I think that we're set up in such a divisive atmosphere for a downward spiral in terms of civil unrest in ways that we have not been set up in the past. We no longer respect free markets the way that we used to. And of course, as you and I, as we have all just discussed, we have a financial disaster waiting in the wings. And I think it's important to recognize that there's another way in which government has become more important in our lives. And that is, and this is a little trickier to describe, but I would say it has become more socially important or more culturally important as certain institutions have declined in their roles in our lives since, for example, since I was a kid in the 1960s and 70s, when, for example, the church played a larger role and certain local civic organizations played a larger role. And to be frank, the way that we viewed families was different in those days. Larger families and families played a different role than they do now in many cases. All of these changes have allowed, for better or for worse, have allowed the government to occupy more of our brain space. And when you combine that with the idea that we live in a diversified and often divisive media environment that aligns with a divisive political environment, you have this recipe for a cultural disaster where we have become, in which we have become a divided nation politically. We all get that. You know, one might argue it's been that way for a couple of hundred years, but socially, culturally, much more divided than ever before, and divided along political lines in a way that we never would have imagined would become this important as it has become. And I think that these are problems for us to wrestle with, and sooner rather than later for our own good.
Yeah, it really very much seems like it's an issue of the size of government and the scope of government. It's gotten so big, it ties all the issues together. So every election is super important because everything is one big basket that's being voted on every time. And it just, yeah, it's nuts. But I did want to ask you, so why did you decide to, I guess, move out of the Libertarian Party? Because one of the things that's new here, and let me bring up the page. Let's see, I think this is, here we go. So yeah, I guess you had recently left for the Republican Liberty Caucus. And so obviously the election, went the Republicans' way this last time, but we've certainly seen some other Republicans that appear to be libertarians in disguise, like Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and such. But I guess why did you decide to make that jump?
Because we live in a two-party system in the political aspect of the United States. It's a two-party system, and in the Libertarian Party, we were the third party. Well, if you're the third party in a two-party system, that means you're outside. That definitionally means you're outside the system. And if you want to make real change, you've got to be inside of the system. So the issue becomes, do you believe that the Libertarian Party can eventually change the system from the outside and change it enough and change it sufficiently rapidly that it could play the role in American politics that it needs to avoid these existential threats to our government and to our society? And I think a lot of folks, certainly a lot of folks on our team, our campaign team, myself included, feel as though, we have lost faith in the Libertarian Party's ability to play a large enough role and to do so sufficiently rapidly. I think the Libertarian Party will get back on its feet. I think that it will learn once again how to recruit more members, how to recruit more money, how to play a role in elections in a way that would reflect its heyday in the past. But I don't think that there's a lot of reason to believe, sitting here in 2025, analytically speaking, I don't think there's a lot of reason to believe that the next 51 years are going to be very different than the past 51 years. That the Libertarian Party is going to continue to go through cycles. It will have its ups and downs. It will right its ship. It will get back on its feet. But is it going to be much, much more effective than it has been the past 5 decades? I don't think so. And that's not to say that it hasn't been terrific over the past 5 decades, because it has been, and in a lot of ways. But what needs to be done now, and I don't mean just, things I wish, things I want to have done. No, things that need to be done. Stopping existential threats goes in the category of stuff we need, not stuff that, would be nice. That means that for those of us who see these threats coming, we have an obligation to do something about them, to do whatever it takes, to think outside the box. For us, thinking outside the box is thinking outside of the Libertarian Party, but not that far outside of the box. You characterize Thomas Massey as a libertarian in disguise. Only if you capitalize the word libertarian. He ain't hiding it.
Yeah.
He is not hiding the fact that he's fiscally conservative inside of a party that is not nearly as fiscally conservative as it used to be, or at least that it has wanted to be, in some cases pretended to be, or to which it has aspired in the past, right? He's not hiding the fact that he feels differently about these issues than a lot of other folks. Remember that the Republican Liberty Caucus is an organization that was started by libertarians. That's important to bear in mind. Libertarians who made the explicit decision not to go the third party route because they felt like they could get more done inside of the Republican Party.
And just to interject, just for our viewers, if you're not aware, a great example is when Ron Paul ran for president first. He ran as a libertarian and he got like 1% of the vote, I think it was, of the popular vote. Then he ran as a Republican. And he actually came pretty close to having a shot at getting the entire nomination from the Republican Party. I mean, they had to, my understanding is they kind of rejiggered the rules at the convention to make sure he didn't. So I mean, I think that's kind of in the spirit of what you're talking about, Mike.
Well, certainly in that spirit, Ron Paul was the head of this caucus at one time, and for a lot of us is the beating heart of the movement inside the Republican Party and the beating heart of the movement in American politics more generally. So the idea that we would aspire to follow in his footsteps, I think, would be terrific guidance indeed.
So Mike, do you see enough overlap between the ideas of the Libertarian Party and that of the Republican Party for you to make this switch from the Libertarian Party to the Republican Party?
Did you say enough overlap? Is that what you said, or enough similarity?
Yeah. Overlap, yes.
Yeah, I do. And let me add, the way I look at this is not as a matter of how much libertarianism is there in the Republican Party, because that answer is always going to be more than zero and not as much as you wish, right? The way I look at this is that there is going to be a debate inside of the Republican Party, but the debate that's already beginning, but it's going to pick up steam soon. And that is to say, how do you replace Donald Trump? Whatever you feel about President Trump, right? And we can all look at the administration and say, there are certain things that reflect what is apparently a libertarian streak in him personally. And there's always things that any of us can point to and say, boy, I wish they hadn't done that.
By the way, if you're watching us on public access, you're going to have to see the rest of the show online, and we're going to continue this discussion there. So thanks so much, and let's continue with the show. Go ahead, Mike. Super.
You got to make the public service announcement, and hopefully folks will come over online and hang in there with us. So there's going to be a debate about what to do inside the party once he leaves, a debate that is already beginning. And I think there will be a couple of things that we can already say about that. One is it's really a matter of defining or grabbing what aspects of President Trump's legacy are going to be. The debate is going to be about, I think that what's really important about the administration and what's worth keeping from the administration is this, this, and this. And the other side of the debate will be pointing to other things in the administration that were good, worth saving, and we're going to be debating in no small part the administration itself. Donald Trump himself to a certain extent, and certain behaviors of the administration more generally. The other thing I think that we can already say about it is that it's going to cut along libertarian lines. By that, I mean, on one side of the debate is going to be folks like us who feel like we need to focus on fiscal conservatism and free markets, on greater adherence to the Constitution, medical freedom, and a less militaristically interventionist foreign policy. And on the other side of the debate is going to be a whole lot of nationalism and protectionism, maybe some folks that tolerate too much authoritarianism in the interest of a populist worldview. I'm sure, lots of well-meaning, intelligent, patriotic, hardworking, honest, God-fearing people will be on the other side of the debate, but it's my job to make sure that they lose that debate.
Well, Mike, you chose the Republican Party, obviously, as the party to join. And I guess for the viewers, could you, illustrate the rationale of why the Republican Party was an option, but maybe the Democratic Party wasn't?
It's the only game in town. There is no other game in town. Libertarian Party is not going to play a major role in American politics anytime soon. Mm-hmm. And I wish that were not true, but it just is the way it is, right? Mm-hmm. And by that, what I mean by that is not big enough, strong enough, fast enough to stop the fiscal crisis coming, or to do something about the deep divisiveness in American politics that is fostering the potential for civil unrest, or to do something about the military interventionism that we see. And we all hope that President Trump plays a role in that himself, right?
Sure. But the Democrat Party wasn't even a choice, I guess. That's
what I was getting at, right? Going to ask
that. And that's a heartbreaker. I do believe, as a matter of fact, I'm convinced that the Democratic Party will develop a libertarian wing. The problem is that I think that could take decades. The Democratic Party, metaphorically speaking, has not even gotten to the starting line for 2028. They are still trying to figure out what went wrong in November of 2024. I would argue that most of the politicians inside the Democratic Party still do not understand what went wrong in November of 2024. And so the only way that party is ever going to correct itself is to get rid of a lot of those people, and that takes a long time. So what have you? The Republican Party. Now, I used to be a member of the Republican Party, and I've been accused, probably correctly, of being a little bit more conservative than a lot of other folks in the Libertarian Party. And so the Republican Party is a pretty comfortable home for me. But even if that were not the case, the Republican Party is still the only game in town. And the major debate that's going to affect American politics, certainly for the next 3 years, and probably the next 7 years, is what the GOP looks like after Donald Trump. That's the big question. There is no other question that rivals that in terms of importance to this country.
Yeah.
I mean, you got the problems with the Democrats in the last election in last November. I mean, could be summed up in 2 words: Kamala Harris. Period.
Well, I think she certainly is emblematic of the problems. But if you were to replace her with you collect everybody in the DNC in the Chicago Stadium, and you throw a Frisbee out into the crowd, whoever catches that Frisbee, you can make presidential nominee, right? And you're going to be right back in the soup. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming majority of that crowd is just one version or another of Kamala Harris.
Yeah, and to illustrate that, both Tim, myself, and Leon, we all live in California, and the proof is in the pudding here, and the pudding is pretty rancid.
Yeah, not a doubt.
I mean, we've seen the results over and over again of California's slide, and that's where Kamala Harris's career started here in politics as well, and
for a long time.
Yeah, and
deeply intertwined with other political politicians and political families. We get all that. She is extremely not only emblematic but representative of the Democratic Party, which continues to believe that the way that politics should be played, should be practiced, is a matter of understanding what demographic groups Americans fall into. Mm-hmm. That's what politics is for them. You know, it's like watching the NFL before people learn how to throw a football. It's just you could call it the same sport, but it requires a different set of skills. You know, you look at the NBA, you know, you've got a bunch of guys running around up and down the court, passing the ball to each other. Then they stop, they plant both feet, and they toss the ball with two hands at the rim, and either it goes in or it doesn't. And all of a sudden, you've got Bill Russell and you've got Wilt Chamberlain running the floor like some of the most athletic human beings in the country. And all of a sudden, the sport changes. And then all of a sudden, you've got Dr. J, and there's no looking back. And you can call it basketball if you want to, but that's a different sport than it was in the 1950s. And the Democrats are stuck in what is ostensibly the same practice, American politics. Yeah. They just don't get it. They still believe that that is a matter of understanding what groups people come from, understanding how to address that group, and then addressing those people as though their group identity is what matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I almost feel like they've regressed in the sense that at least on some social policies, they used to be a little bit libertarian on things like freedom of speech and things like that. But even though on economics, they were backwards. They've always been backwards. But at least on some of those issues, they were, you know, I always felt like they were an option. And in like the last 10 years, I haven't even felt like in those things, they're not even an option. They're just, you know, they've lost all contact with liberty.
You know, it's really interesting you brought it up in that context, because I have often tried to explain libertarianism to folks as a combination of the right-hand side supporting free markets and the left-hand side supporting free markets for very, very different reasons. I often see if I can describe this in 60 seconds so I don't put your viewers to sleep, but I often suggest that free markets from the right-hand side is kind of how I grew up. I grew up as a banker, as in financial services. You know, we were in love with Milton Friedman, the whole bit, right? In the late 70s, and then I was working in the 80s in New York, and yada, yada. You get it. And the whole idea was the world works better. The economy works better. We make more money when the government stays out of it. Free markets are the most efficient way to run an economy. And nobody should be arguing with that. The only counter argument is not that that's not true, but that for a variety of reasons, you need a social safety net, or you need to correct certain things that don't work very well. And so you need some interventionism. That's the only counter argument. But if all you cared about was GDP, if the only thing you cared about was economic efficiency, there's no, you know, plan A is you keep the government out of it. That's just the way it is. That's what I call coming to liberty from the right-hand side as a matter of efficiency. And it wasn't until I was older that I realized you ought to be able to come to this from the left-hand side, which is to say, this is a thought experiment. So cut me some slack here. Imagine a world in which Hayek was wrong, a world in which socialism works. Imagine that the government really could make decisions for you better than you can yourself, that you would have more money, a better job, better grocery stores, whatever, better car, better international trade, if the government made all the decisions for you. Okay, this is a thought experiment. So Hayek is wrong, socialism works, capitalism doesn't work so much, freedom doesn't work. If you really want bigger GDP, it's got to be all about socialism and letting the government run your life. Okay, so this is the question. In this universe that I just made up, which we all believe is completely impossible because it's completely impossible. But the question is this. Would the government have the moral authority to make decisions for you?
No.
Exactly. The answer is no, because there's more at stake than just efficiency. That you have the right to make whatever stupid decision you want, even if it's inefficient. And from the perspective of someone, and you should feel sorry for me, I was raised by a Lutheran and a Calvinist. If you, thank you, Leon. If you see the world through those eyes, you are obliged to make your own decisions. You are letting down your faith and your family. You are letting down your culture and your God. If you see the authority to make decisions for you and your family, if you see the authority to make those decisions to the government, you're not doing what it is you were put here to do. You are not a fully grown ass adult if you're not making decisions for yourself. This is what we are called to do, right? We are not called to be on this planet in order to be automatons and just do whatever it is that, in my case, Springfield, Illinois, would tell you to do. Yeah. We are put on this planet with free will because we are expected to make decisions for ourselves and for our communities and our loved ones and for our families, right? But we're put here to be thinking about this.
But Mike, I mean, you just said something that really triggered me a little bit, in the sense you said, speaking about capitalism, nobody would disagree that that's the most efficient or the best way that an economy should organize themselves.
This was imagination land, Leon.
Yeah. But where do you look at that statement and look at how it's been applied out in the real world? New York City is about to elect a communist, and this communist is not even quiet about his intentions. Yes,
you're making this up. This can't be true.
I'm sure it can. I'm sure. I just dreamt about it last night. But the point about it, though, he is not even quiet about his intentions. He's talking about having government-run grocery stores. Could you imagine that? We'll see the lines longer than they were in the Soviet Union.
He made a video about it. You don't have to imagine it. He imagined it for you. Okay. Yes, like the Soviet Union. Not even like Russia. That's an interesting point. Kids, ask your parents. Leon, and thank you for bringing some gray hair to this conversation. It's funny that you said the Soviet Union instead of Russia, because it was worse. Yes. The Russian economy is nothing to write home about. No question about it. But it was worse.
Yeah.
And good for the Russians. They have made progress in terms of ceding the authority to make certain decisions to capitalists. Still, if I were a capitalist in Russia, I wouldn't make too many decisions that Vladimir Putin didn't like. It's not a complete free market. Let's not get carried away.
Yes.
But it is a capitalist system in the sense that capitalists are running the businesses. It's just that there are a lot of decisions made by a very small number of people, the oligarchs, and none of those decisions get made in a way that Putin doesn't like. It's funny that you picked that example. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think, first of all, I think I don't have a great answer, right? But I will offer you the observation that I have, and that is that he obviously did a very good job of talking about what it is that people are worried about, which is to say costs. The cost of living in New York is, of course, very high.
Yes.
Well, if you're living through it, this is horribly annoying. No question about it. And no one should say otherwise. It's horribly annoying. But New York is going through an adjustment. And if you're a cold-hearted economist, you recognize that it's in the midst of an adjustment, which is to say people making below a certain amount of money are going to have to leave. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing. That's not a good thing, but it is an is thing. right? That's just the reality of the situation, is that a couple of decades from now, there just won't hardly be anyone who doesn't make the equivalent in $25 of $100,000. You just, it can't be done. But the way to make that adjustment is you have to price people out of the market. It's a horribly difficult thing, but that is how this works, in the long run. And I don't think that people care enough to put the time and energy into investigating someone's solutions. The old adage, a lot of politicians say this, the old adage, I don't care what you know about until I know what you care about. And he clearly represented himself as caring about what it is that his constituents care about. So in that sense, good on him. He was very effective in communicating that. The other thing I think that needs to be said that sometimes gets overlooked in our discussion of the New York City mayoral race is consider who it was that he beat, who we thought was going to have a good chance of winning until a few weeks to go, the former governor, right?
Yes.
Well, this is the prototypical guy who probably should be losing. He's out of touch. He's older. And I don't mean, older and wiser like you and I, Leon. I just mean older, right? I mean, this is a guy with a disrespectful history toward women.
Yes.
Just keeping it real. A disrespectful history toward how to treat our economy during COVID. A lot of people don't remember that, so maybe there weren't too many people voting on that. But you can't get much more establishment in New York than to have a last name of Cuomo.
You're right. True.
And so if you're running against the Young Turk, Cuomo is not an asset. That last name is probably a liability in a race like that. If there was a more free market oriented, I don't even know what that means in the context of a Democratic primary, but if there was someone more sane who maybe was younger, either literally younger, chronologically younger, or at least younger in the presentation. And I don't just mean, orange hair and full of energy, although, who doesn't love orange hair and full of energy? But if younger ideas, who didn't come across as part of the establishment. I mean, Cuomo oozes establishment. He's practically the key holder of the old boys network.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have someone with a younger feeling campaign, does Mamdani win? I don't know.
Well,
It's a good question.
One thing
but the thing is,
Leon, real quick here, I just wanted to bring up, there was you mentioned the grocery store thing, and I just wanted to say, for short memories, a guy like Mamdani probably doesn't remember that when a government came that ran the grocery stores, the head of the government, Yeltsin, came to the United States. He couldn't believe how good the grocery stores were here that were run by the market.
He thought it was fake.
Exactly. He thought it was he thought they were run by the government.
Yeah, he thought it was like fake, like they set this up for his tour.
Yeah. So
he doesn't realize you could go to any grocery store in any town across America, and you might not find your favorite third brand of pickles, but you're going to see full shelves.
Indeed.
Well, Mike, we are at the top of the hour, so I'm not sure if you have any more time. I did want to touch on a few more things, but if you don't have the time, then I guess
let's do one more question. I do have to let's do one more question.
Okay, well, I guess I did want to touch on, and I had some video, but I won't show that since it doesn't seem like we have time. But this kind of illustrates the issue here, and that's that Trump has essentially launched a war against Thomas Massie. And so Thomas Massie, I feel like he is representative of the Liberty Caucus, the Republican Liberty Caucus. And
he's our guy.
Yeah, and it is an internal war right now within the party. And since you've kind of are joining that cause, what are your thoughts on this? Obviously you're saying it's what it winds up after Trump, but we've seen them take sides now, and
it starts already, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Musk has literally said that he is going to attack any GOP that vote for the big beautiful bill, because if they had previously promised not to do that, that they were going to cut spending, and if for people like Massey who are holding to their guns and saying, hey, when's the cutting of the spending going to happen? We can't wait 5 years. I want to see some of it now. Trump is going after him, saying he's going to have him primaried to try and get him out of the party. So anyways, that's what we're facing right now. That's what you're facing head on now too, being in the Republican Party.
It is.
So what are your thoughts
on
that?
It is what we're facing. Look, Massey has been primaried before. He's always successfully faced that down. I think that he will again. I'm not convinced that it's going to happen, but if it does happen, I think he'll face it down again. Anecdotally and polling data both suggest that he has never been more popular. His popularity in Kentucky is off the charts. He is a rock star. And that's not to say that there aren't some people who are pissed off. There are. There are Trumpers who are mad. I get that. But Massey's got two things going for him. One is that he has always been honest with his constituents. He doesn't have a track record of, sometimes I say this and sometimes I say that. So when he says something that seems controversial, people give him a little bit more ear than if some whack job who just fell off the back of the pumpkin truck said something controversial. He has built up some credibility that at least gets him a look from his constituents. That is really important. And the other thing that needs to be said is that he's right. And, that's not language we typically use in politics, right? We typically don't talk about right and wrong. But in this case, he's right, and in a way that is just sort of arithmetic. He's just the one with the guts to talk about it, which brings up really a third point, which is, who doesn't love to root for a guy in a situation like that? Even if he were wrong, and this would be cringy, even if he were wrong, you'd at least be saying, kid's got stones, I got to hand it to him. And people do like that, especially when he's your guy, right? I'm reminded, when I was growing up, there were a few pitchers who every once in a while would trot out, major league ball players who would trot out the lob pitch, the soft toss to throw guys' timing off. And it's just, it's a trick. It's a goofy thing. It's stupid. And if it's used against you and it embarrasses one of your favorite players, you get all pissed off. But when it's your guy doing it, it's like, oh yeah, that was smart. We're skilled. We're thinking outside the box. We know how to play this game. And I think there's a little bit of that going on in Kentucky too. There's a little bit of, we've got the nut job, but he's our nut job. He's our guy. And that carries some water, it carries some water in politics. You cannot argue he is anything but authentic.
Indeed.
Well, Mike, we are just, I think we'll probably continue on a little bit to talk just amongst ourselves a little bit, but I did want to bring up your webpage again. And also, too, just so people know, what are your plans as far as what you're running for? Are you planning to run for a House seat, or are you planning to run for a state position?
No plans to run a campaign of my own.
Okay.
Folks can go to ter.maat.com, just like ever. There's a Republican Liberty Caucus page. You can learn about it. You can click through. You can become a member. $45, become a member of the Republican Liberty Caucus. It's a good idea. It'll make colors brighter and food taste better. and the caucus could use a few dollars. It's the best deal in American politics. But if you're thinking about the Republican Party, you're thinking about your own role in politics, if you'd like to get involved, reach out to me personally. I think my phone number is probably still on the website, but certainly my email address, mike@miketermaat.com. You have to spell ter Maat right. It's got 2 A's in it. But, drop me an email. I think there's a place on the website where you can submit stuff too, but, drop me an email directly. Oh yeah, the get involved thing at the bottom. But that's slow. I check that every 2 weeks.
Contact Mike right here.
That might be faster. I don't know. But my email, isn't my email address over on the left, or maybe Corey's is? But one of us, email me at miketermaat.com, mike@miketermaat.com, and just tell me you've got some concerns or worries, or you want to get involved. We're recruiting hard. We're recruiting people to create new chapters of the Republican Liberty Caucus. So we have a chapter in every state, and then each of those new chapters is going to represent a new charter and represent a new way of looking at things in that particular state, and recruiting new people into there. So there's a lot of work that we're undertaking. We're going to be doing nothing but building up the caucus over the next 12 months so that next year we can get involved in some races, pick out some good candidates to endorse, maybe knock on some doors for some good local candidates, maybe even a congressional candidate here or there. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Thomas needs a bodyguard or something one weekend. I could help him out in that regard, or whatever. There's always fun stuff to do in politics. And this is a new vehicle for doing that. If you believe in liberty and fiscal conservatism, and you agree with me that the game in town worth getting involved in is the Republican Party.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Mike, for joining us. And like I said, we're not done with the show yet for the rest of us, but thank you for spending your time with us and letting about the changes that you're taking toward the future and the future direction of the Republican Party. So
thank you. It's always a joy to be with you guys. We're going to have to do it again.
Indeed.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much.
You take care.
Thanks, Mike.
thank you, Mike.
Thank you. See you later, Tim.
All right.
See ya.
Well, so I'm going to throw it up to you guys. Did you, because you guys didn't get too much of a chance to comment on this Thomas Massie thing. So, I had a little bit more material to show on that if you guys want to go deeper on that, or we could jump right to the Knucklehead Noise Patrol if you guys want to do that. So it's up to you guys.
Wow. Wow.
I want to see what's going on with the Thomas Massie stuff. I've read about it and stuff. If you have something, I'll go with it. I don't know what Tim feels like.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go along.
Well, we got to hear Tim's thoughts on it. So let's set the stage a little. We got to hear Mike ter Maat's thoughts on it, but for those of you who maybe haven't been paying close attention, there's a little bit of background happening here. So first of all, I wanted to lay the groundwork of the big beautiful bill, and that is what the big fight is about for the most part. There's been some issues too with the Iran-Israel war policy and stuff like that, but the main show is the big beautiful bill. So we've talked about this before, but I think it's important to set the stage because that's where the battle line is right now within the Republican Party.
We're working very hard on a great, big, beautiful bill, and we're trying to come up with a name. And I said, why don't we just go with the great, big, beautiful bill? That's what everyone, so we're going to probably do that. We love that bill. I won't like it if it doesn't pass. Neither will you. If it doesn't pass, your taxes are going to go up 68%. To show you how middle income this is, there'll be no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax for the great seniors in Social Security.
The House bill is going to add about $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. The Senate bill adds $5 trillion. There's nothing fiscally conservative about expanding the debt ceiling more than we've ever done it before. This will be the greatest increase in the debt ceiling ever, and GOP owns this now. The deficit this year will be $2.2 trillion.
This bill dramatically increases deficits in the near term, but promises our government will be fiscally responsible 5 years from now. Where have we heard that before? How do you bind a future Congress to these promises? This bill is a debt bomb ticking. Congress can do funny math, fantasy math, if it wants, but bond investors don't. And this week, they sent us a message. Moody's downgraded our credit rating, and the bond investors who buy our debt and finance our debt demanded higher interest rates on the 10-year note, the 20-year note, and the 30-year note. What does this mean? Very soon, the government will be paying $16,000 of interest alone per U.S. family. And what are we telling them? Instead of taking care of that problem, we're going to give you a $1,600 tax break. Under the taxing and spending levels in this bill, we're going to rack up, the authors say, $20 trillion of new debt over the next 10 years. I'm telling you, it's closer to $30 trillion of new debt in the next 10 years. Mr. Speaker, we're not rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic tonight. We're putting coal in the boiler and setting a course for the iceberg.
You know, I was disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing. I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it can be both.
So that's where the battle lines are drawn. And you can see the people that we've been talking about: Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, and Elon Musk, and the issues that we've been discussing here. And this was the article that we talked about where Musk was threatening to primary Republicans who were voting along with this big beautiful bill now. So I mean, he's re-injected himself back into this fight, but Donald Trump hasn't been quiet either, and he is also throwing down his gauntlet too. So I'm going to show a quick video that will show some of his remarks as well, about the attack that he's taking.
On Truth Social today, President Trump raised the stakes in his very public spat with Thomas Massey, writing, "Anybody I endorse beats Thomas Massey of Kentucky by 25 points. Get ready. Massey is a very bad guy." Those words come on the heels of a blistering attack ad.
What happened to Thomas Massey?
This political ad by a group called MAGA Kentucky is now airing throughout greater Cincinnati. The ad attacks Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massey's opposition to President Trump's spending and tax bill that narrowly passed the Senate today. The ad also criticizes Massey for disagreeing with the president's decision to bomb nuclear sites in Iran.
Massey sided with Democrats and the Ayatollah. Let's fire Thomas Massey.
Massey has represented Kentucky's 4th congressional district, stretching from Greenup County to north of Louisville since 2012.
And here's a little clip of Trump attacking Thomas Massey from a day ago.
Question of Massey. What about him? Just give us a little idea of not only who you want to replace him.
He does a good job for the country. He's always a no. I call him Rand Paul Jr. He's always a no. Nothing constructive at all. I mean, just terrible. Thomas Massey from Kentucky. And nothing constructive. I don't think he's a very smart guy.
Trump attacks Thomas Massey by comparing him to Senator Rand Paul. In my book, that's about the best company you could be compared to in Congress. Now, Elon Musk has also re-entered the fray, saying that he will back Thomas Massey in a primary challenge against him. And he is also vowing to go after people who had previously pledged to vote to cut spending and are thus voting for the big, beautiful bill. So at this point, President Trump now is going back on the warpath against Elon Musk.
What happened to Elon Musk? Nothing. He's upset that he's losing his EV mandate, and we accept. He's very upset about things, but he could lose a lot more than that. I can tell you right now. Hey, Elon can lose a lot more than that. We'll have to take a look. We might have to put Doge on Elon. You know what Doge is? Doge is the monster that might have to go back and eat Elon. Wouldn't that be terrible?
The ultimate irony in Trump threatening to sic Doge on Elon is that both Elon and President Trump were committing to cut between $1 and $2 trillion from government with Doge, and almost none of that wound up materializing in the big, beautiful budget.
That's what I got elected for, that and borders and military and a lot of things, but this is a big part of it. And I hope that the court system is going to allow us to do what we have to do. We got elected to among other things, find all of this fraud, abuse, all of this horrible stuff going on. And we've already found billions of dollars, not like a little bit, billions, many billions of dollars. And when you get down to it, it's going to be probably close to $1 trillion. It could be close to $1 trillion that we're going to find. That will have quite an impact on the budget.
So there you go. So what are you guys' thoughts on this? Those are the battle lines. That's what it's all about.
Just rephrase what he said at the very end there, because I have the very low volume on my the replays here for some reason, probably my equipment or something. But was he saying that he campaigned, or during the campaign he voted to reduce the deficit and all that? That's what I remember. Is that what he was talking about, or is he talking
Well,
about?
this was from a press conference he gave in February from the Oval Office with Elon Musk, where they said that they were going to probably reduce at least $1 trillion from the deficit, from the debt.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
because I remember them looking for that $1 and $2 trillion magic number to reduce the deficit by. So now instead of that, it's going back the other way and going to increase it by, I don't know, 3 to 5 trillion. You know, the bill's still bouncing around, but it sure as heck isn't a reduction. And to get as far as Massey goes, to pick on the number one most austere, one of the most austere politicians in Congress, pick on that guy while you're at the same time purporting to be some guy that's going to reduce the deficit. That's just, I don't know, something seriously wrong with that. I mean, what's wrong with that picture? I see a lot. I mean, you know, so again, gosh, I'm shocked. A politician campaigned on one thing, and when they got elected, they turned around and flip-flopped 100%, more than 100%, actually, about 300% or 500% when you go, what's going to be minus 2 trillion? Now it's going to be plus 3 trillion. That's a ton. So he flip-flopped on that when he became the president. And oh my God, you know, I guess MAGA people are going, oh, I don't care. It's Trump. You know, whatever he says goes. He's the genius. You know, he just knows everything. But
those are not MAGA people you're speaking about. But go ahead, Tim.
I'm sorry?
Those are not MAGA people you're speaking about. But go ahead.
Oh, I thought MAGA people, he cannot do anything wrong. I thought that's what they were all about. But
those are not MAGA people you're speaking about. But go ahead.
Okay, so they can criticize Trump. Okay, that's good. That's a good thing. So anyway, he's just doing what all politicians do when they get elected, and that is their true colors come out. He's just shilling for the military-industrial complex. He's in the pockets of all the, you know, totally in the pockets of the Israeli government and their the whatever their caucus is, or their the people behind all that. It's a powerful entity, and so you know it's all about making all these other things great. Sure is not about making America great. So just a pathetic display of partisanship, or not partisanship, but pathetic display of just pure he's God, what's the word? He's just in the pockets. It's just fraud.
Well, we tell us what you really think.
I was thinking of myself.
That's it in a nutshell. I mean, what else can anyone think? He's doing the exact opposite. I mean, you know, there's the numbers. The numbers are right as plain as the nose on your face. I don't understand how anybody could argue that that's not what's going on. You know.
Well, I will say, just for one point of defense, is that and granted, he's seeing Rand Paul as an enemy too, but Rand Paul has said that he would vote for this if they simply kept the debt ceiling, so that this would have to be a fight that they'd have to get into again once they hit the debt ceiling again. So, you know, because he actually likes the tax cuts that are in this. So I mean, not everything is necessarily bad in this. It's just that they're not cutting near what they claimed with Doge. That's the issue.
No. So yeah, if I could say anything about that, I'd say sure that they're talking about having tax cuts, but absolutely zero spending cuts. In fact, they're increasing spending, especially military spending. So you know, what is the result when you cut taxes and you don't reduce spending? Is that you have higher deficits? Okay, you're going to increase, you're going to cut taxes and increase spending. What does that do to deficits? Well, that's where they go.
Not necessarily, Tim. Not necessarily.
No, every time, Leon. Seriously.
If the economy, if the economy outpaces spending, we could certainly have a reduction. It happened during the Reagan years. Okay. Now,
Okay,
I am not going to defend. I am not defending this bill where the spending is concerned. But this bill has some very good things in it, things that I like, and I think that you would like. But however, that spending issue is really a failure of the Trump administration. And if you're talking about Trump keeping promises, I don't think there's anybody ever sat in the Oval Office in the last 20 years who have kept more of their campaign promises than Donald Trump has. But this bill that he's supporting right now is seriously problematic where the spending is concerned. I love the tax cuts that is in that bill. Okay. And if we don't have them, our taxes are going to go up higher than we would like. Okay. So I like that. But do I want to pay the price of the increased spending? No, I don't. But I don't know how you get around that when politics is the art of compromise. I really don't know how you get around that. So it is true. We have to do something about spending. Spending is the government debt is a serious threat to our freedom and our liberties and for even our existence as a country. We have to do something about this debt. But I don't think that you can just, as a result of this failure on Donald Trump, you can paint with a big brush and say his administration is a failure. The man is keeping most of his promises. This one is not. I think we need to do something about that.
Yeah. Well, if I were to correct myself, I would say that if the economy in general, in a whole, has a big increase, okay, so the GDP went up in total, then you could have tax cuts and continue spending, and still, because your economy grew so much, that growth, the percentage of taxes would still pay for some of those increases in spending. You can have that. But are we having any increases in the economic output of the United States today?
Yes.
Now,
and it might increase after this bill passes, quite frankly.
Okay, so you're going to see the GDP of the United States go up. Is that what you're saying?
I think it will. But the question is, but that does not mitigate the fact that we must do something very soon about the spending that is going on, especially at the federal level. Yeah, we need to do something about the state level too, but especially at the federal level. That doesn't mitigate it.
Yeah, well, of course, I agree with that. Of course, I mean, that's the crux of the issue. But I think what Trump is thinking is that some of his policies, he thinks, is going to increase GDP so much that he's going to be able to cover it all. I disagree, and so does David Stockman, with numerous data points from economic activity going on in the country today. It does not indicate, in fact, does not indicate an increase in GDP, but to the contrary, indicates a decrease in GDP. So, it's still seeing what's going to happen. It's been early.
Tim, you heard it here first, okay? David Stockman is dead wrong.
Okay. All right.
Well, one thing I just wanted to chime in with is that, the strategy that Elon Musk has of wanting to primary all of these politicians or these Republicans, I sympathize with Musk, because as you can see, he appears to be he was sold a bill of goods, I guess, when he went in with the Trump administration, thinking that he was going to get to cut a lot of things that apparently weren't legitimately on the menu. He literally thought he was going to get this, and then he was rudely awakened when suddenly we're talking about a $9 billion rescission bill. Is all we're talking about. And he put his reputation on this, and he spent several $100 million, I think, of his own money to get Trump elected in this. So I think that he feels betrayed. But my worry is, and this is where I think it's kind of wrong-headed a little bit in what he's doing, is it's not that it's terrible that he's talking about primarying these guys, but the real issue is it's not the politicians, it's the people It's the people who elected them, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the issue, right? These politicians are standing up for what the people want, and the people want the wrong thing, right? If the people wanted these cuts, they'd be voting. These politicians would be voting for these cuts, and that's the problem. And this is where I think Elon Musk is missing the mark just a little bit here, is because if he takes a signal from his friend Milei down in Argentina, Milei was educating people for a long time. He was in the Congress and he was going on all the TV shows and speaking out and saying how terrible socialism was, and he is an economics professor as well. So I mean, this is his bread and butter, and he was energetically going out and doing this. And so when he finally got to power, he actually had a little bit of juice to do what he needed to do. Plus the people were feeling the pain too, which helped. But I think what Elon needs to do, Elon has Twitter, Elon has his Grok, Elon has all of these other resources at his disposal. He needs to really fund an effort to educate people about free market economics and why we want to get away from all of this government spending and government control, because it maybe somebody like him has the resources to actually break through all this nonsense out there where people are literally thinking government grocery stores would work in New York. Right?
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that?
I mean, this is nuts. Right. But that's the real problem. We got to change the minds of the people, not change the politicians for one election just because they were worried you'd outspend them. They'll be the same politicians next year because they'll be representing those same people the next year. You've got to change all those people's minds. And that's where I think Elon should be focusing his resources on.
You know, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The debt is a threat to us, but that is not the biggest threat that we face right now. The biggest threat that we face right now is complacency among the citizens of the United States, because we always end up with the government we deserve. And if this trend continues, look at this fool in New York City. And he's not even hiding it. This is the thing that is scary about this. He's not even hiding his intention. Oh, he's going to have these lovely government-run grocery stores. Could you imagine that? And people voting for this guy. So it's not the debt. It is not the debt itself, even though it's probably symptomatic of the problem. It's the complacency of our citizens that is the biggest problem that we face right now. And this is why, Jason, you have a good point. Elon should really take his time and spend some money, some serious money, on trying to educate the citizens of this land of the dangers of some of these things that they are voting for.
I think they ought to have fun with this one. This is going to be good. I can't wait to see how this works out. So I want them to elect this mayor. I want them to have all these government-run grocery stores. I'm going to want to see it in action, okay? I think it's going to be a complete and total abysmal failure, like they all are, all these top-down, centrally planned economies. So let's just see how it works out. Let's just watch it. And if anything's going to educate somebody, it's going to be when they walk into that store and there's nothing on the shelves. Okay, that's a good education right there. That's the best education, because they went in to buy something because they need something, and they walked out empty-handed. And where they're going to go to find stuff, if they can, because everybody else is going to go there too, is they're going to go to the privately held, if there are any left in New York City, or if they have to have it shipped in, buy groceries on Amazon or something. I don't know. But let's watch it. Let's see how it pans out.
I actually think that Tim's got a point. I mean, I think it's wrong-headed what Trump is doing right now, which is sort of sounding like he wants to take on Mamdani, which is like, I mean, dude, he's not even in your arena. Just let him fail on his own there. And this is the issue, right? If when California was failing, when Biden was president, Newsom was able to rely on Biden to bail him out. But if they start failing in New York because they go all in on socialism in New York City, there's not going to be anybody to bail them out. Trump's not going to bail them out. So, the last thing you want to do is get in the way of them failing. I mean, it'd be great if a Republican goes in there and they split the vote between Eric Adams and Mondavi and a Republican sneaks in and wins. But, I think it would be better for libertarians and in the Republican Party in general if Mamdani gives this huge signal of how terrible socialism can be by winning in New York and putting in all these government grocery stores and all the other terrible ideas he wants to do.
Let him go. Let him rip. Do it. Mike mentioned how New York is going to be just for really wealthy people that can live there. It's only once, can retire in New York. So I think also same thing's happening here in California, is that there will only be people that are either that have so much income in retirement that they can afford, $100,000, $150,000 a year lifestyle, $25. Or if they are currently employed and they make that much money. But this California is not going to be affordable. It's already not affordable. So we'll see. We'll see.
Well, Tim, this is the one thing I would have pushed back on, both what you're saying and what Mike's saying, because I agree with you. That's absolutely the way it's going. But I think it's because we have so many government controls, both in New York and here. And if you just let the market behave as it's supposed to behave, you would wind up having a market signals that sent things in better ways. I mean, it's all of this government control that's winding up causing all of this super elite and then tent cities to be, right next to each other. I think the issue is you just need to allow the markets to work. And I think we'll wind up having something that looks better.
Yeah, that's a great idea. But, you're talking on the left and the right coast, the left and the other left coast. Are they going to suddenly change their ways and go, oh, I've seen the light now, this is economic lunacy? Not until it totally crashes, and we're a ways away from that still. It's being propped up artificially, and both artificially and real, because they're both on either side. There are major port cities or states like ours that has, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and to a lesser extent, San Diego harbors that are right there on the Pacific Rim.
Long Beach also.
Long Beach, yeah, that's correct. We've got these major port cities that are just and everything's coming from China, Japan, and Vietnam, and the Philippines. So it's all coming in here. I mean, it's like you can't not, really have a hard time losing with that kind of business that's coming into the state. And to a lesser extent, I think New York, that has still got that whole European continent. So anyway, it's going to be a while, but I don't think they're going to see the light until it actually totally crumbles. That's just my pessimistic view.
Okay.
You may be right. You may be right. I do feel that the hurt and pain that this guy is going to cause if he's able to implement his policies in New York, I mean, to me, it's too great to allow to happen. But maybe you might be right. That might be the only way by which people wake up to the misery of government touching everything in their lives, including grocery stores.
Yeah, and the money too. I mean, the clip on Massey, he was saying, about how they make up all this funny mathematics, but the bond markets don't, and that's where the money ultimately comes from. So if nobody buys the U.S. debt, and there's a de-dollarization worldwide thing going on, and it's I think coming up. There's an important meeting. I can't remember what country, but some South American country or something. But they're all aligning against the dollar, and even Canada. Of course, you piss Canada off. What are they going to do? Well, they're talking about joining the BRICS and getting involved with China and Russia more, and getting away from the dollar. So, you know, that kind of stuff is happening all over the world. And when, you know, if it continues, which it looks like it will, especially the more we go into debt, the less attractive our debt is to other debt holders. So there you go.
The South American country you are speaking about is Brazil.
Brazil, okay. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I just read it today, and I was really going fast through stuff, so kind of speed reading it or something. I can't remember. But anyway, yeah, all that's going on. Meanwhile, hey, let's just go into debt. Hey, how about 5 trillion? Hey, how about 50 trillion? You know, I mean, you know, these guys throw it around like it means nothing, like they have that capability of doing that.
There's that hockey stick again, that debt hockey stick, that existential debt hockey stick.
It's starting to look like an angle iron, actually.
Well, there's no fuzzy math in this, other than that it should probably be higher if you included those obligations that we have that aren't included in this. There you go. Sure. But you know, I do
about that. I mean, because the Social Security, whatever they call the accountants that work under Social Security, they keep revising it back, but it's like now 2033, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. They expect Social Security, the trust fund, to be completely depleted. Okay. That was a neat trick. So then what's going to happen for all of us retirees to get our monthly checks? Well, it's going to have to come out of the general fund, folks, or they're going to have to cut back. There's only 2 little options there. And, you know, nobody likes to do either one.
Yeah. And for anybody who's counting the math here, this chart is 1 year behind because it's a government site. So Treasury.gov, the number is actually not 35.46. It is over 37 right now. Anyways, just saying. But you know, speaking of too much government control, you know, I think I have a story that will kind of hits the mark on that, and will also leave you guys laughing a little bit. But for our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, so we have a story out of London that happened a little bit earlier this year, but and they've been playing around with this, but you know, we have issues where we talk about gun control in this country. Well, the slippery slope we've seen in the UK is that has shifted to knife control. And so I have a video to show you about that, because they have a new spokesman now. They have a new hero on their side to push knife control in the UK. So let's go to our Knucklehead Noise Patrol video.
I'm excited today because for a long time now I have wanted to reinstate the assault weapon ban.
The idea we still allow semi-automatic weapons to be purchased is sick. It's just sick. It has no social redeeming value. 0, none. Not a single solitary rationale for it except profit for the gun manufacturers.
So that was Democrats back in the Biden administration coming after our gun rights in the name of safety. And of course, they are always trying to regulate things in the name of safety. But this is kind of a slippery slope. And if we want to really see where this ends, we can look over toward the United Kingdom and London, where they've had gun bans essentially there for quite a while. Well, what did they wind up slipping to? Well, knife restrictions, because the violence didn't end. It just shifted toward knives. And now they're restricting knives.
Outside Parliament today, a disturbing depiction of the human cost of knife crime. Each bundle of clothes represents a life lost to a blade on Britain's streets. 247 in the year to June. It's part of a campaign to end knife crime led by Hollywood star Idris Elba, who says the challenge is to tackle the misconceptions.
The misconceptions are really broad, from the fact that, you know, that it's some underground belly you get these knives. No, you know, if you're old enough, you can buy one from your phone and it can get delivered to you by the postal service.
The government admits more needs to be done to tackle the root causes of knife crime, while campaigners hope they now have a voice that cannot be ignored.
So the voice they've found to restrict knives in England is that of actor Idris Elba. So let's take a look at some of the types of films actor Idris Elba stars in.
Hang on, I'm coming for you.
Well, thank goodness. I was worried those films he was in might have promoted knife violence. But let's see where Idris actually thinks these restrictions on knives should extend to.
The truth is that kitchen knives are perhaps 25% of the knives used in most of the terrible crimes. That's one of the stats in the films. And those kitchen knives are usually a domestic situation. Okay. So kitchen knives, of course, it's very difficult. They're a domestic knife. I do think there is areas of innovation that we can do with kitchen knives. I hate to say it, not all kitchen knives need to have a point on them.
Well, you heard him. Kitchen knives can be sharp and pointy, and that is not a good thing. Rest easy, London. There's a new hero in town. His name's Idris Elba, otherwise known as Sporkman.
So there you guys go. Tim, this has got to be near and dear to your heart.
Well, I don't know if they're going that direction, but he was one of the actors that was up for being the new James Bond, the black James Bond. And so I don't know what they're going to do with that, because James Bond, maybe he'll just use karate chops exclusively.
Or guns, but just no knife.
or guns, yeah. James Bond is usually a little too classy for the knife fight. But so maybe he's got a point about the points, that maybe all kitchen knives maybe don't need a point. But I would imagine if you're slicing tomatoes, okay, and you sometimes you need a point to start into that tomato, but maybe not always. So who knows? Maybe they'll have these rounded ones. Now they're really, really sharp. So theoretically, you could still slit somebody's throat with the knife because it's sharp, right? You got to have a sharp knife. I mean, you can't cut tomatoes, you can't cut veggies, you can't cut your carrots with a dull knife. You got to have it sharp. So if it's sharp enough to cut a carrot or any other vegetable, it's sharp enough to slit somebody's throat. Okay, so still, they're just barking up this wrong tree. They ought to be asking, why do we have people killing people so much? What's going on there? What's going on in society where you have such a lack of morality that people resort to murder as often as they do, even though the murder rates are much lower than they were back in previous times. I mean, long time ago, murder rates were much, much higher for other reasons than just, what you might think at first, but still, they were skyrocketing compared to today's rates of murder. Anyway, there you have it.
These idiots always treat the wrong problem. They have a very big, massive problem in Great Britain right now. We have some Pakistani descendants, mostly Muslim men, grooming young girls, and they're trying to cover that. Okay? They also have a religious component to these knifing that is going on in Great Britain. Some of these young men are doing the little jihadi kind of crap. Nobody will ever mention that. They talk about knife problem. They talk about, it's a domestic situation. They talk about this, they talk about that. But if you look deep below it, you see there's a religious component to this whole knifing business that is going on right now. But nobody's going to talk about it. These porn knives are just jumping off the shelves and stabbing these people on the street. I don't know what the cause is. I don't know what the problem is. Poor these people. They're just being stabbed by these knives. No, they're not being stabbed by knives. They're being stabbed by these people mandated by some kind of craziness in their religion. And that is what is happening in Great Britain right now. And nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I forgot that aspect. That's very true.
But what begs the question too is, we've got issues with ghost guns here. So like if you want to restrict somebody's ability to buy a gun, we've got 3D printers now. People can literally make their own guns if they really want to. And, somebody who had the skills probably could have done that anyways without these 3D printers. But it's trivial with a knife. I mean, my God, cave people figured out how to make knives.
Really?
You sharpen a stone. I mean, you could break the end off of a fork or something, and you've got a sharp pointy thing like a knife. This is just nuts, the idea that they think they're doing something here by regulating this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just
prisoners make knives all the time.
Absolutely. And but you could turn almost anything into a knife. You get a piece of wood, you could get it sharp enough and all kind of stuff, and you could do damage with it.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yep. Well, it's just this whole idea of top-down central control over human nature and humans. It comes back to that. To me, it's just an investment of everything you're thinking about into I'm having trouble with words today. What's the collectivism? It's just about collectivism, and instead of individualism, they're constantly invested in collectivism. So, if you have a problem, well, we can collectively fix it if we take away the implement or whatever, the tool that's used in the crime or whatever it might be. So it's just collective thought versus individual thought.
Yeah.
Well, if we had serious individual thought, the citizens of Great Britain would have had means by which they can defend themselves. But gun control is so strict in that place, you can't defend yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and those, and also their laws. There's kind of laws strict, about self-defense. I mean, it's you can't use excessive. You can't even use equal force, or you can't use force over and above. So if somebody's coming at you with a knife, you can't shoot them with a gun. It's excessive, right?
Yeah, right.
With all that extra socialism over there, you would have thought it would have been such a paradise. Nobody would be stabbing each other over there.
Tell me about it.
You'd think by now, for sure.
Yeah, but this is the key issue with this and so many other issues in society is we can all clearly just laugh about this and say this is nuts, the idea that government thinks they're doing something here. But think about all the other things that government thinks they're doing something with, right? And it's just one nutty idea after another that's being forced on everybody, and it's not only is it wrong, but it's not addressing whatever the real problem is, right? And I think we're much more likely to do that with the market than government, and this is a perfect example of that. So
I got a problem with a crying kitty cat here.
Okay, it's probably crying because the show's gone on too long. So
that's it. Look at it.
I think that's a good sign to wrap it all up. But if you've been watching this long and you saw Mike ter Maat, and he's got something going with the Republican Party. Libertarians are still going strong. We'd love to have you look at our party as well. But there's a million things you can do as an individual in your own community. So just before the next show, think about what you can do to advance liberty in your community, because as we've seen, they're coming for it everywhere. Even in London, they're even coming for your knives. Nuts. So anyways, until the next show, stay tuned and stay free.
Oh, yes, indeed. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.